Hi everyone, and thanks for hanging out in the kitchen with me today. Today in Chicago, I wanted to make something that would be perfect sort of spring snack, but if you know what happened in Chicago, there's a lot of snow right outside those windows today. Hopefully it'll all melt off by the end of the day, but we got a lot of snow. Covered all the flowers in my yard, so we had both winter and spring all at the same time. But today, what I thought would be really fun is to sort of go old school and do the little rolled up crispy taquitos. Because I don't care what anybody says, as old school as they are, they're still one of my favorite things to eat. We have had them on the Frontera menu since day one. That means 33 years. They've always been on there. We've made some changes as we've gone along with them, or some of the fillings. We'll have our special guest back again today to show you how to make a tequila version of an old fashioned with a beautiful twist. So let's get started with making taquitos. They're pretty easy to make, though. You have to be not afraid, I would say, of frying. I've got a lot of little pointers along the way. First thing is chicken that we're going to make a filling out of. And this chicken I poached. I used this is just a chicken breast that I had up here, similar to the one that we cooked yesterday. And what I did was to poach it in what I think is the easiest style. Bring salted water to a boil, then put the chicken breast or breasts in there. This also works with chicken thighs. You let it come back to the boil, turn it off, and let it sit for 12 minutes. Okay, that will mean that you will have the juiciest chicken breast, certainly breast, that you could ever have with that poaching method. So you can see it's just barely cooked all the way through. I'm pulling it apart because I want those long strands in there. The strands will help to keep the filling inside, and the pieces shouldn't be too big. So I'm pulling some of these, which I think are a little bit big, apart again. And then I've got a last little bit of it here to pull apart. But I'll tell you, it is incredibly juicy doing the poaching the way that I said, 12 minutes in salted water. Okay, so we've got that all there. I'm going to add to it Mexican oregano. Here's where I'll tell you all your options. If you want to put a little bit of spice in this, then chop up some serrano or jalapeno peppers and put those in here. Sometimes we have, actually right now, I think on the Frontera menu, we have this made with that chicken breast, but smoked, cured and smoked. Smoked chicken taquitos are super delicious. If you want to make sure that they have a creaminess on the inside, sometimes we will add, believe it or not, this is really true, mashed potatoes. It's really delicious because little flautas with potato in them are a classic in Mexico. So we put some potatoes in there, or right now we're putting some black beans in there, which add a nice creaminess. So it's all open to you, whatever you want to do. I'm going to add a little bit of salt to this. I poached it in very salted water, which is the way that you would do that. And so it doesn't need a lot of salt, but a little bit on the surface. Now let's talk the tortillas that are going to go in this. Okay, so we've got, the recipe would call for tortillas, okay? If you just make your own tortillas and then make taquitos out of them, they'll be the worst taquitos that you've ever had. So I brought up some of these that are made in the restaurant, and these are what we would call table tortillas after they come off of the griddle. They go into these styrofoam containers where they retain their heat and all their moisture, and these are sort of thickish, and they're absolutely delicious to eat, but if you fry them, they will come out sort of, well, first of all, they will absorb a lot of a lot of oil, and they will come out tough. Okay, if you want to make really crispy taquitos, you need to find the kind of tortillas that are fried into chips. So they're going to be thin, dry, and made from coarser ground masa than a regular table tortilla. So where do you find those? Well, number one, go to the grocery store, and whatever tortillas you find there, you'd want to get the thinnest ones. Those are going to help you to have this crispy, crunchy texture to it. But if you live near a tortilla factory, go in and buy the ones that they sell for making chips. That will be the best ones. So these are the ones we get for making chips. If you look at them closely here, you will note that They're very thin, but they also just look really dry, okay? And you can see flecks in there, which indicate that they're more coarsely ground. Okay, you want to make sure that they're all apart. I'm going to take 2 or 3 of them. So I've heated oil over here. Everyone will ask me, what is the oil that you fry in? So I would fry in something that will take high heat. At home, I use safflower oil that I buy in quarts, and it says for high heat cooking right on the label. And that's the one that I think is really good for home use. I'm in the restaurant, so I'm using what we have here, which is rice bran oil, which is absolutely my favorite for frying in because it has a very light flavor. Now, you might not be able to find that easily in your stores. There was a while that you could find it, but not anymore really. So I'm gonna take I have my tongs in that water there. So I want to make sure to dry them off because I'm going to now put them into this oil. See if we get any, no, nothing there. So we have to first, a little bit of that's the residuals of the oil, of the water from my tongs. I'm going to grab 3 tortillas here and just slide them, slide them into this. There should be bubbling like that, and that's it. And then I'm going to lay them onto these paper towels over here. I got 3 more that I'll pick up here and slide in both sides. I just want to see a little sizzle happen all through it there. And this step will help to make these tortillas very pliable. If you try to roll taquitos without doing this step, your tortillas will break, especially if they are cold. Okay, I got a couple of extras here that I'll toss back there. And then I'm going to just pick up these tortillas that are now softened in the oil. You would think that this would make them more oily in the end result, but it doesn't at all. So I'll stack all this up here. And then one by one here, we will put some of the chicken in the middle, and it's never very much that you're going to put in there, and then roll them up. You want to roll them pretty tightly. You'll start here on about 1/3 of the tortilla, and then roll it up like that, and then set them seam side down over there. So as you're rolling it here, make sure that you've lined up all of the pieces of the chicken so that they are going to hold in and not float out during the frying process. Roll that over like that, and I'm going to just make these 6, but you see that this process doesn't take very long here. Just rolling them as tightly as you possibly can. Now the next thing that I'm going to do with these guys is I'm going to skewer them. Now, you don't have to do this, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It just makes your life a little bit easier when you're doing the frying part of all of this. And we've made thousands and thousands of these in our restaurant. And I will tell you another little trick, especially if you're going to make these for a party. Yes, at some point in our history, we will be having parties again. But if you want to do these ahead of time, it's actually better. You'll want to have these guys cold when you start the frying process because they won't fall apart at all. So I've got a couple of skewers here, and you'll pick them up one at a time, and you will skewer through them so that the flap side is down, is on the inside there. And then the second one I will put like that. And then the third one, I will do the opposite direction to keep the flap on the inside there. And then I'm just gonna break that skewer off right there so that I can then skewer the next 3. So let's do that again. I've got the flap on the left side here, and then I'm going to put the next one tightly up against that one, and then the third one with the flap toward the other 2, like that, and then just break off that skewer. Okay, so now these are ready to be fried, and they won't unroll. They'll look really nice, but I'm going to set those aside. while I make the toppings for taquitos. There's two things that you pretty much always find on these kinds of taquitos, these crispy fried taquitos in Mexico, oftentimes called tacos dorados or golden tacos because they're fried. But two things that you almost always find will be Mexican crema and Mexican queso fresco. My mouth waters when I hear those two things said in conjunction with this, but I like to have guacamole with it, so I'm going to cut around this avocado, and I'm going to show you one of my absolute favorite and absolute fastest guacamoles that you could have. I've cut around the pit, now dislodged that pit, and I'm going to scoop out if I can grab the right spoon here, the avocado, and then I'm going to add to it salsa verde and some cilantro. And I'm just going to mash these up or chop these up to start with my spoon because I'm making a very small amount of this. I didn't get the potato masher out for it. And then I can just kind of give it a coarse mash because I want some pieces of the avocado to be in there. That's my preference for guacamole. And it doesn't take more than a few seconds to mash them up like that. And then I'm going to take this salsa verde. You can buy jarred Tomatillo Salsa if you want to, or you can make your own salsa verde. One of these days we'll make that. We haven't yet made that in these kitchen hangouts. But I'm going to season this mixture with a few tablespoons of the salsa verde. I'm going to give it just a sprinkling of salt because the salsa verde is seasoned there. And then take the cilantro, just a little handful of cilantro, chop that up, and then add that to it because I love the flavor of the fresh. You'll never, especially in jarred salsa, you'll never get that fresh flavor of cilantro because they have had to pasteurize anything that goes into a bottle or a jar. So I'm chopping this up very finely across like a chiffonade, and then I'm going to add that mixture or that chopped cilantro to this other mixture here. That'll give it a really beautiful fresh flavor. Stir that up, and that's that really quick guacamole. This is the kind of guacamole you find a lot in Mexico City area, sometimes made with a lot more salsa verde, so it's really more like an avocado salsa verde sauce. And you could try that too for this, but I wanted mine to be just have a little bit more body to it. Last thing that we're going to talk about here is it's radish. I like radishes on my taquitos, and the reason that I like radishes on there is that I like their fresh crunch. And so we don't have in our restaurant right now any fresh radishes because we do a lot with our local farmers, and what they have right now are the storage radishes. Those that have been with me through this whole endeavor of the kitchen hangouts know I've talked a lot about these beauty heart radishes. This is a storage radish. It's harvested in the fall and then it's kept all winter long, and these are the radishes that we use the most in our restaurant. So I'm just going to cut a couple of slices off of this. It's a denser radish than the little red globe ones, or even the ones that are the French breakfast radishes. It's got a much denser, you see how hard it was to cut there? Well, I'm gonna make some little strips out of it that I think will be really beautiful to put on top. So really what I'm doing here is making these little sticks. In culinary school, these would be like little tiny bâtons. That's the style that they would tell you that you are making here. I think I can do that with this piece too, and it'll be a nice little garnish to go on top. Now, how do I know if my oil is at the right temperature for frying? Well, I would do that either with a thermometer, which is what I always recommend if you're going to be doing any frying. Always have a thermometer, but I just thought I'm not going to use a thermometer here today because I want to show you that you can tell what the temperature should be simply by touching the side of this into this and see what happens. So if it starts sizzling really quickly and beautifully like that, it's ready. It's ready. Now with the first step that we did, where we just quickly dipped them in the oil, that's not such a precise thing. But for this frying, we want to make sure that it's quite hot. We're going to say 360 to 70 degrees. That's what will give us the right texture in the final fried things. I'm going to slice up a little bit of romaine lettuce to use as a bed here because I like its freshness against the fried taquitos as well. This is the moment in which I would like to introduce Lainey Bates again. Last week she gave us the master class in making margaritas, and today she's going to go veer off a little bit and do a sort of agave version of an old fashioned.
Hi everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us today in the kitchen and watching. So today I'm going to talk to you about different ways you can make an agave variation of an old fashioned. As we talk a little bit about some different ingredients you can use, but one thing I really want to highlight that I think is going to make this old fashioned particularly delicious is this red chili liqueur, or an ancho chili liqueur that we're going to use, called Ancho Reyes, a delicious liqueur made in the state of Puebla in Mexico. A beautiful hand-done process for all of this, and lucky enough, we're able to find it in a lot of major liquor stores around now. So that's very exciting. So by using that product as well, it's sort of going to give a little smoky, very slightly spicy, but there's really not a ton of heat to this for our old fashioned. So in order to begin, I'm going to talk a little bit about if you wanted to use tequila or mezcal and why you would choose to use different ones. So if you do want to go that tequila route, I highly recommend doing an aged tequila. Probably a reposado would be the one that makes the most sense. That's the tequila aged from 2 months to about a year. So you're not maybe going all out and spending all the money on an añejo tequila, but a really good reposado tequila has a little added sweetness that will help bring this old-fashioned together. Again, we talked a little bit about the brand Espolón last week, and we use their Blanco tequila, which is really clean, delicious, and agave forward in flavor. And the same goes with their reposado tequila. This is what we use here in our restaurants for the classic Topolo Blanco margarita. And it's one that I think is really great. It's not got a lot of those barrel notes to it, so it's not super sweet, and the agave flavor still really shines through. So if you are looking for something a little bit on the sweeter, rounder side, and maybe a little less chili flavor, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why that would be in a minute, you would go with that tequila, reposado tequila. Now, if you're looking for something a little more adventurous, bringing that smoky flavor, as well as punching up that heat just a little bit from the ancho, I would suggest going with a smoky style mezcal. Now, we used that delicious Del Maguey Vida last week. That is a little less on the smoky side and more on that sweet, robust side. Still very complex, though. Today, I decided to pull out a much more smoky tequila, and that's from... Oh, excuse me, not tequila, mezcal. From Banjes in Oaxaca. A really great product that works with a co-op of families in the Ejutla region of Oaxaca. Now, this particular one does emphasize its smoky flavor a little bit more, which will really play well with that ancho liqueur. So let's talk proportions. A very traditional old-fashioned is really just 3 ingredients. Your booze, typically in a traditional it would be bourbon or whiskey of some sort, some sugar, and some bitters, some cocktail bitters that give it a little bit of flavor. Now, obviously, we're going to sort of turn things on their head by adding that Ancho Reyes to give it a little bit more body and flavor to it. When we do an old-fashioned, I personally always would start with a 2-ounce pour of our spirit. I'm a total mezcal geek, so I'm going to go the mezcal version and give it a little bit of extra smoke and spice here. So 2 ounces of that is going to go into a mixing glass. Now, this is different than the cocktail shaker we used last week. You're still obviously welcome to use that as the base, or you can use a pint glass if you have that, but we're not going to be shaking this drink. We are going to be stirring this cocktail, and I'll talk a little bit about why in just a minute. So we started with that 2 ounces of mezcal in here. Now I'm going to add a 1/2 ounce of this ancho chili liqueur, just to give it a little bit of that chili flavor and smoke.
And sweet.
And a little bit of sweetness. Yeah, it's not incredibly sweet, but there is a little bit of sweetness to it. For my sweetening agent, I'm going to go to use agave nectar. There's lots of different sweetening agents you can use. Agave I like because it's got a lot of body to it, so it will make the cocktail a little bit richer. It's also slightly on the sweeter side. If you were to use a simple syrup, which you could easily make at home by bringing to a boil equal parts of sugar and water until the sugar dissolves and then letting it cool, that will be a little bit less sweet and have a little less body to it. But no matter what you do, I would start with a 1/2 ounce of that, or 1 tablespoon of that mixture. Again, this also can be totally changed to suit your own taste. So if you know you like your drink a little bit sweeter, add a touch more, or vice versa if you wanted it to be a little on the less sweet side. But sticking around that 1/2 ounce measurement or 1 tablespoon measurement is a great place to start. So I'm going to add that into there. Now, just to review, in my mixing glass so far, we've got 2 ounces of mezcal, a 1/2 ounce of that ancho reyes chili liqueur, and a 1/2 ounce of light agave. Now, the last component is going to be bitters. When you have a very traditional old-fashioned, a lot of your flavor does come from these bitters. Cocktail bitters, like I'm using a very classic Angostura bitter, are very complex. They've got lots of different herbs and spices to them, but the main flavors that you're going to get from Angostura is a little bit of bitterness and some sort of cinnamony clove sweetness to it. So again, this is something you can customize to your taste. Personally, I think 2 dashes of this. So a dash is just going to be where you shake it, 1 little, dribble into the glass. So I think 2 is the perfect place to go. But if you want to add a little bit more of that sort of sweet cinnamony flavor to it, especially if you were going to use reposado tequila, it would help bring out that flavor. I'd say add a 3rd dash into there. So, just wanted to touch very briefly on if we did do this using the reposado tequila. It will have a lot more sweetness to it inherently, obviously, since it has been aged. So I would just be very cautious about going a little over on that sweetener because you don't want to make something too sweet. Also, if you are a little bit afraid of that chili flavor, heat, or smoke, I would say definitely stick with that reposado tequila because a lot of times sugar will sort of balance out the heat and make it a little bit less strong. Again, I went that sort of more aggressive, strong way, as is my preference in cocktails. So I would go ahead and use the mezcal, but the tequila version will be absolutely delicious as well. So I'm going to stir this. If we can get the ice out. Let's see.
Let's see. Can you get it? Do you have enough? I can kind of break that apart.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
There it is.
Okay, so before I get to stirring this, I'm going to sort of tell you a little bit about why we would stir this cocktail as opposed to shake it like we did a margarita. This cocktail being only spirits and a little bit of sugar doesn't have a lot of components that you need to break down. Lime juice is a component that needs to be broken down and really integrated into the rest of the alcohol and the sugar, or else you're going to have a very unbalanced drink that probably the sugar would be on the bottom and the lime on the top. So you're not going to want that. Because of this cocktail already, the ingredients are all sort of in the similar vein in terms of their viscosity. There's a little bit less we have to do. So by stirring it, you're still doing 2 components that we talked about, or actually I guess all 3 of the components really. And when we mix the cocktail, which is to dilute the cocktail. So by breaking down that ice a little bit, you do get some extra water in there, and that helps bring all the flavors together. You're also going to chill the cocktail. And then the last thing is just to truly incorporate and get that agave syrup or any sweetener you use fully dissolved into the liquid. So I'm going to go ahead and stir that.
Is there a number of times, because sometimes I hear bartenders talk about how many times they stir something to get it to be properly cold and diluted?
So I like to say about 10 seconds.
About 10 seconds.
It also depends on what cocktail you're doing. Now, when I think of the beautiful life when we used to be able to work in Bar Sauterelle, before all of this started, there are particular cocktails there that, depending on their ingredients, you need to stir them less or more.
Okay.
I would get very far into that in terms of the
going down a rabbit
yes,
hole.
it's going down a rabbit
seconds
hole.
for this.
But for this guy, any sort of more standard cocktail like your martini or your old fashioned, I would say an old fashioned, do that 10 to 15 second. A martini, really try to keep it at 10 seconds.
Okay.
That one is, there's not a lot of sugar to break down in that. There's less time that you really need. So after I have stirred that here, I am going to present, this is a standard rocks glass, but you can use anything at home. And get that all in there. Now we're going to top it with some fresh ice.
Sorry, I thought you
That's
were
okay.
finished with the ice. Okay.
And then one last little thing is going to be an expression of a piece of orange. Now, this is also a very standard part of an old-fashioned cocktail. I did not do this here very well. This is a brand new peeler, so I got it. I just had to get a little practice there. So, this is not really working today, so we're just gonna have to stick without that expression of orange on our particular one.
You could do
Or a ragged one. You're right. I can do a little ragged one here. But I want to talk to you about why we would do this. Now, when you get an actual strip of the zest, which I have sort of done here, you take the side that has the outside of it where all the orange oil lives, and you would just press that down and get that oil out. Now, that does a couple of things. It obviously brings a beautiful aromatic. I can smell it even with this piece here. But it also is going to add a little pop of brightness into a cocktail that's got pretty dark, rich flavors to it. And then you can twist it up here, kind of. Again, if you have a good orange that worked properly, you could twist that up there and put it as a very sad garnish.
Sad garnish. Okay, so here's the deal. None of our bars are open.
Correct.
And so we went scrounging to see if we could find an orange here today. And I found one in a refrigerator here in our test kitchen. And I have no idea how long it has been there. But it's dehydrated and dried out completely on the outside. So she couldn't get it off. So it has nothing to do with her ability to take off the exterior. It's a very dried out orange there. So let's go back and finish these taquitos here. So I fried them. I've got about a half to 3/4 of an inch of oil in there. I showed you what it looked like, the temperature-wise, when you put it in there. So it's got a sizzle fiercely. I cooked them for about 3 minutes per side, and then put them onto paper towels to drain. When you put them onto paper towels, make sure that you prop them up on something so any oil that's gotten in them is going to come out. Then pull your skewers out here. I'm gonna lay these guys over some romaine that I just cut crosswise about a half an inch. And then these, because we're not deep frying these, they will probably have just a little bit of softness on the sides there, with some this is Mexican crema that we make here. I've talked more about it other times. That it is made, this version of it is made from sour cream mixed with heavy cream and then allowed to ferment at room temperature for about 12 hours, then refrigerated for 12 hours. There are guacamole made with the salsa verde. We'll go over that. I can't hardly talk because I love these things so much, and now I'm starting to get my mouth watering here. There is actually nothing quite like this, the beautiful richness of this. We're going to sprinkle over the top the little batons of the Beauty Heart radish here, and a little queso fresco over the top of all of that. Now that is a snack, a meal, an appetizer, a happy hour specialty fit for a king. You serve that with this really beautiful mezcal version of an old-fashioned.
Of which I did find a beautiful grapefruit that I could
so you
cut for you guys and show as my garnish there.
That's very nice. You have retrieved something that we could do.
I have.
Not a dried out grapefruit. Okay. Thanks so much for joining us in the kitchen today. We got to get busy here eating this stuff and drinking.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you guys tomorrow.